Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Rachel and Dana. This is a podcast where two book coaches, editors, and besties discuss books not as readers but as writers to draw inspiration from great books and have plenty of laughs along the way. And for this week, we are wrapping up our discussion of Sin and Magic by K.F. Breene. So we've talked plot, we've talked characters, and now we're kind of pulling those together into our kind of major takeaways that have kind of risen to the surface from the discussion we've had over the last 2 weeks. But before we do that, because y'all know we've got another book coming down the pipeline starting literally next week. So we're very generous. We give you a whole week head start to read the book. Never mind that usually if it's a Rachel pick, it's long. Maybe one of these days we will post, like, you know what I mean? Like, post the schedule so it's like a reading list that everyone can just like grab the books and read them well in advance. Because our next book is going to be Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. So this is a fantasy. It's got a little bit of like a romantic subplot in there. And it is a fairy tale retelling of Rumpelstiltskin set against the backdrop of, I think we're looking at like 1800s Eastern Europe. And so it's very much sort of like, it's a fairy tale retelling, right? So you're kind of in that ordinary world with the layering over of a magical world, but it feels a bit funny to call it urban fantasy because urban fantasy generally, the name tends to denote modern times. So almost more maybe like a historical fantasy, you'd think, fairy tale retelling. I literally just while we were on break started listening to it again and I forgot just how good it is. And so I'm really excited to get to share that with Dana and to get to share it with everyone. It's interesting because Naomi Novik, she broke into the industry with like action epic fantasy. So her, I think it was her debut series. I could be wrong. Maybe she had another book before that. I'm not super sure because I think the Charlemagne's series came after that, which is like a dark academia. So forgive me if I'm getting her books out of order when she published them, but I believe her debut series was the basic premise was the Napoleonic Wars, except dragons. And so it's another historical fantasy. So it's like the era of like Napoleon conquering, but in a world where dragons are also like, you know, in a kind of a magical world overlaid over the history, which is really cool because I really like seeing these kind of like historical periods filtered through a magical lens, right? When you sort of like reimagine history as having magic in it. So she makes her debut with this very like action epic fantasy, like it's, for lack of like a better like turn of phrase, it's sort of like, oh, it's boy fantasy, right? It's like dragons and war and shifting into fairy tale retellings, which is a very like it's a big change in sort of like tone, and seeing the way that she does it really. Maybe she agonized over the book, but it looks effortless, right? Like it's so well done, and it's very beautifully done. As in her prose is very good, and the atmosphere that she sets is like, I mean, it's like winter wonderland, and it's a little like, oh, it's just so good. And it's sort of also set against this backdrop of like the Jewish experience in Eastern Europe at this time. And so it's very, very layered with like, you know, the I'll say the legends almost of like Jews as moneylenders and the kinds of stories that were sort of like circulated in this era about Jews and Jewish moneylenders, and sort of taking those and like cracking them open, and telling like, we'll say like the true story inside of the legends that people told in a way. So there's so much good stuff in it, and I can't wait for you to read it because it's super, super good. So I got a jump start on it while we were on break, and it's fantastic. So I'm very excited for you.
Listen, you know, whenever I just say, okay, because I don't know until we do it, but it sounds great. I have it. So I'm looking forward to reading it too.
Good. Yeah, I think we're going to have a lot of interest because I know that you love a fairy tale retelling.
I do. I do.
She
I
also has
don't
a
think I've
Beauty and the
ever.
Beast fairy tale retelling. I haven't
Ooh,
read
I
that
love
one,
that.
but
I don't think I've read a Rumpelstiltskin one, but
I
it's
haven't
all good.
either.
I just love it. I just
Yeah.
love them.
Yeah,
Especially when you start
honestly,
doing it against the original, like not the sort of Disney-esque versions of them. But
yes.
yeah, I'm looking
Kind of
forward
gives
to
you
it.
something like fresh to bring to the it makes it feel fresh because it doesn't feel like the Disney version, so something you're super familiar with or that feels saturated, but it's got a little bit of like a a surprise in there. I don't think that Rumpelstiltskin is like the most popular fairy tale.
It's
So
not.
the fact that like that's the one that she chose, I was like, what a choice. Like of all the like not romantic fairy tales that you could sort of because I'm pretty sure Rumpelstiltskin, like he sounds like his name. He grows. Like, he's like a wrinkly old like eh. So taking that and like but turning it into something more magical than creepy gremlin wrinkly.
Well, I wonder if that's probably why she did. You know, how sometimes whenever you're doing it, you aim to try to be different, and that difference is by picking something that most people don't, versus it
Yes.
being picking something that we are familiar with, but doing it in a different way. It's sort of
Yeah.
like one of those choices that you have. And so, yeah, because I have no recollection of a story that's been a retelling of that particular fairy tale. I mean, and
Yeah.
I know a million Beauty and the Beasts or Cinderella. I mean, the
Yeah.
Cinderella framework is a part
Very
of romance.
popular. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah. Yep. And that
I'm
one is a
excited.
long one. It's a
Yeah, it's
long
about
one.
the audiobook is about 17 hours. So it's I really I will say I just dear listener, dear Dana's already heard this because I told it to her directly. I didn't remember it being that long. I was like, oh, this is like, whatever, 13, 14 hours. Which is only a few hours longer than other books that we've done. Things We Never Got Over was 17 hours. And I was like, oh yeah, it was shorter than that. Like it wasn't that long of a book. And
It
then
was
I looked at
17?
yeah, oh yeah,
Oh
Things We Never Got Over is
wow.
long. And so yeah, when we were getting ready and we were sort of like I was like, oh yeah, this is the next book that we're doing, and we were like pulling it up. She was buying the audiobook, the ebook. I pulled it up and I was like, oh
And actually it is
no.
18 hours. She said 17, baby. It's 17 and 56 minutes.
We are not gonna on the plus side, it's shorter than Mistborn, which is 20
Okay,
hours.
that is true. It is shorter than Miss Board. Why do
And
you
I
keep
didn't
finding
bring
all
in
the
Way of Kings, which is I think the first Way of Kings book is like 32 or 35 hours.
That's
It's
which book?
The Way of Kings. It's the first book in Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive series.
Hmm.
And they only get longer. Every one is longer, so that the final book was like 60 hours. It is a bonkers long book.
Girl, that
So
is somebody's
see,
job. That is a job.
but now 17 hours is like,
Girl, you are not selling me. You are not selling it well.
I think I'm making it worse actually.
You
Like
are. Yes.
somehow by comparing it to other books that I'm like, well, these books are longer. Somehow it's making this other book look worse. Somehow I'm not. It was supposed to be like an exercise in contrast, and it's not. It's not going well. So I better change the subject before I keep sticking my foot in my mouth.
I'm already in. I already bought the book. I'm ready.
It's true.
I'm
It's
locked
too
and
late
loaded.
now. It's too late now. So we are in it. But I think that I think you'll enjoy it, and it's not as like it's not as gritty as Ninth House, right? So like Ninth House, you were sort of like, excuse me. This is much more like, there's still like it still has those like kind of external action type stakes and like risk of physical harm and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But it doesn't have that horror bend that Ninth House leans into, where you're like
What in the
opening the
world?
book and it's like, I'm sorry, we're doing what with that man's innards? Excuse me. So
I
it's
was
a
like,
little
every time
gentler.
you, I I have to stop, and then I was like, what book is this? And I gotta go to Amazon and look at the blurb, or
Check
look
the
at the about the
cover,
book, because
vibe check.
I'll be like, oh Lord, and then I text you, what do you have me reading, child?
And
You're
then you get back,
messing
I
me up.
promise it's good.
Like it's good, but what in the world? What in the
It's
world?
good, but at what cost? I cannot wait, Dana. Later this year, we're reading Hellbent. I am so excited for you to experience Hellbent because it's so good.
And my thing is to be able to read Hellbent, I have to read Ninth House again.
Well, lucky you. I just finished a second read through. Not a second. I mean, we're talking like a 50th read through by this point. To prepare for book club for our for our fellows, for our alumni in the academy, because we're doing like a specific book club and doing a specific study on Ninth House. And I'm reading it again and I'm just like, oh man, this is so good. I'm excited for you to get to read it again. Because you also were like, I need to give that book another read. It's been on your list to like, I need to revisit that one. So revisit that and then get you some Hellbent. Oh my God. I'm happy.
She is getting way too excited. I've already read the book 3 times. And each time has been because of you. Well, no, one time it was my own doing, but
only 2 times.
Because I had to keep restarting. I was like, wait, what? But it's all good. No, for real, it's all good. I give you a hard time, but it's all good. And once it got rolling, it was really good. And then it was a bunch of those like, what in the world? I had to text you. What do you have me reading? But it's all good.
I got some panic texts and polos that I was like, wait, no, listen, let me explain.
Girl giving me a long message of what I am reading.
Let me break down the themes and analytical frameworks.
That's when you said Verdugo. I was like, oh Lord, now she's gonna give me a dissertation.
I only have one speed and it's dissertation. There's only one. Like we literally, when we got on this call, you were like, all right, what's on your list? And I was like, well, so there's really only one speed. It's dissertation.
No, I'm going to start asking for the Trevor Cliff Notes because he knows how to get right to why I might be off. Go on, Trevor, tell him to help us sister out.
He did offer to podcast in my place today. I was like, man, I'm really tired. I was like, okay, I better go. And he's like, do you want me to podcast for you? I'll do it. Tell Dana I've not read the book. She just walked me right through it.
Listen, if he can stand in, I'm gonna let Keeman stand in. And Keeman ain't touched it with a 10-foot pole, so go right on ahead. We lose all our listeners that day.
That podcast episode, it would be so good. Just Trevor and Mr. Pittman trying to talk about a book that neither of them have ever read.
Or just read the first act. Just have them read the first act and see what happens. Girl, that would be funny just to see. Can you imagine though? It's very interesting, even as we talked about Ninth House and thinking about this particular story and how her interpretation on the ghosts and the spirits and sort of how that evolves over the books, because it is kind of a little bit on the edgy side. She masks it well.
Yeah.
But I think it's very interesting, an interesting perspective or an angle on how she approaches it.
Yeah, I do think there's something to be said for, there's actually a couple of interesting things about this. Number one, these books actually came out in sort of similar within a year of each other.
Okay.
So they came out around similar time frames. And what's interesting is this is something that Brandon Sanderson talks a lot about, is there's this weird thing that happens in media where two people will have very similar ideas, completely independent of each other. Because Leigh Bardugo's Ninth House is about a girl who can see ghosts, and Sin and Magic and Sin and Chocolate and the series is about a girl who can see ghosts. And we have Alex Stern and Lexi, they have these funny parallels of things that are very similar conceptually about them, but they come from two different people and develop in completely different ways. And that is just one of those things that happens in media where two people will have super similar ideas. Because I think technically Sin and Chocolate released shortly before Ninth House. So obviously Ninth House was in the trad pub track. So I don't know how long it took from like finishing the book to actually get the thing, like out the door. But where you will have like, and Brandon has talked about this, where like he and a completely different writer, having had no contact with each other, they'll sort of have these similar ideas, and these books will come out at similar times. But what it also shows is like the way that you give two people the same idea, and what they do with it and where they take it is very, very different. So you do have a little bit of that, like you still have like, undead and ghosts and some of that, like, ooh, little creepy, little spooky, but she leans away from like the gore of it and the ugliness of it, right? For I'm sorry, KF Breene leans away from that. And also, right, this is a romance, so we're not, if we want it to be sexy, we're not going to be like, look how gross this is. Like, that's not where we're going to necessarily put our attention. But she kind of like, she softens that, so that again, where like, if we think about where she's pointing the camera of the story, it's not, oh, this guy has half of his face gone and there's a gross naked man who wanders around, and that's the sort of horrifying reality of being able to see ghosts. The way that Leigh Bardugo leans into the dark side of that ability, and the whole story takes a leaning into this much kind of darker direction. But those are two people with very similar concepts and even similarly named protagonists that go in wildly different directions. And that's just one of those like interesting things about both media and just the way that creativity works in individuals as well.
And what she does is, a lot of times when she have those moments, it's like insert humor to sort of deflect a little bit from it, so that it's still 100%. There and it's on the page, but it deflects and it works. I mean, I think it kind of slides a little, it doesn't slide darker, but I think because of the descriptions of it, I mean, you can't help but, like, especially when they go into what was the little center, or
was it the government building, you mean?
Yeah, when they went to the government building and what they find there, and then later, I mean, when they find in those houses in that sort of district, like all of it is sort of escalating, and so it almost is like, I can't think of the other story. I think, was it one that we did? But just how sort of laying the foundation in the beginning, and then it sort of gets a little bit darker as you move in, because the reality of what's being done and exercised makes it so.
Yeah, for sure. And she's sort of like, right, and we do get that kind of right at the very beginning, when they visit this. This is not really a spoiler because it's at the very beginning of the story, but they visit sort of like those spirit houses, or the houses with the spirits in them, and you sort of see like, oh, but keeping like the camera showing us, letting us know that it's there, but not like zooming in on it, versus like the prognostication where there's a whole scene and it's just like, by the way, we're watching like someone be physically unpacked, and really focusing on the details. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just the amount of time that you spend on those details affects the tone of the story and how it comes across. And so she sort of escalates toward that a little bit. KF Breene does, because we see a little bit more, like at the end, we see a little bit more, as we go, we see a little bit more and a little bit more, and she sort of escalates there, versus Leigh Bardugo starts there, and it's like, it's only going up from here, guys, buckle up. And it sets a very clear tone. And so that's, y'all, you're getting this one for free. That's just an aside. It's like the amount of time that you focus on particular types of details is a part of how you set the tone for a story. So that's how you can sort of have like, right, what you would think of as like PG-13 violence versus R-rated violence. The amount that you see and the amount of time that you spend on it is a part of how you set expectations for the kind of story your reader's going to get.
Which is something we're going to talk about today, because part of that is also like, looking at, I mean, it's one of the biggest roles of your opening scene, right? About like, how are you sort of establishing what that expectation is, and to be able to equip them for the journey that they're about to embark on, because those are two different types of journeys. I mean, having a story open with her in this second, or this like Ross sort of Marshall's kind of store, gawking over a Burberry, versus what was her name, her sitting on after whatever happened in ninth house, and I was like, wait,
in the prologue,
what just happened?
Yeah, and she's like remembering like there's a bone jutting out, and she has these crazy bite wounds that are infected,
and what happened?
Yes,
it's like, wait a minute, girl.
Yeah, setting very specific expectations for like the tone to expect.
When you push play and you stop and you're like, wait, did I push it right? But
hello.
and as we get ready to just like move into the conversation, it's so important here, because part of that is like it prepares the reader for what they're about to do, but it also helps with how much wiggle room they give you as the writer to sort of lay the groundwork. I mean, for ninth house was like, wait, what? And of course you're curious because you're like, wait, why? And why is she, wondering if she about to flunk out? And like this, how do we even get here? And the fact that it was in the future really made it like, yeah. So then when you have that versus, because I remember the first time I started reading Sin and Chocolate, I thought for sure I started reading the wrong book. Yeah. I was like, wait a minute. She's talking about a Burberry and like they're this, fighting like, very over this
ordinary setting.
And I thought I had the wrong demigods? Book. Girl. I kept going back, looking at the cover, looking at the blurb, because I was sure I had the wrong book. And I was like, no. Yeah. I'm like, why is she talking about a Burberry purse? And then he comes in and you just don't even really fully realize until she starts saying the magical zone. And you're like, oh. So it's like, I think it's very interesting to think about all the things that you're communicating without being explicit in a lot of ways, because you're talking about, whether we should expect it being steamy or explicit, whether or not we should expect that it can be like, it can push you to the edge as far as, because there are some scenes in Ninth House that I still think are just like insane. Right. Of it's still within the theme. It's still within the tone and vibe, but they were just so unexpected, but fit just right. And I think, even with some of the things that we had when we talked about this particular series of like, whether it's the pacing or what was set up and what the delivery was, as far as this being a book too, those beginning chapters do so much. And not beginning chapters, the first chapter, whether it's a prologue or the chapter, just has a lot of ground to cover, and it's not all content, like the substance of like how you're doing it, but it's like the tone, the feel, what you reveal, because that becomes the foundation in which you build everything on and gives us an understanding of what to expect. So that balance for Lexi of being a little bit the one in Sin and Chocolate of being almost humorous and inappropriate moments, or in those moments where she gets a little too nervous, or using that to sort of diffuse a little bit while still making the thing be a thing, is one of the ways where she kind of gets almost a very deep topic in scope. If you're talking about the afterlife and souls and spirits, and using that in the context of control and manipulation versus love and connection, and seeing romance in your person, you know what I mean? Like it's a very interesting thing. Versus Ninth House, there's no comparison. Like no relation. Like they used to say.
Amazingly similar concepts, and you were like, boy, these have next to nothing in common.
How they used to say that was on Looney Tunes. It's like Bunny, no relation. No relation at all. Both great stories.
Both great stories. So on that note, actually, this is like, because we kind of already like have launched into it. So do you want to go ahead and break us in with a summary real quick, get the people caught up, and then we'll talk about those points we want to hit?
Yes, sure. Sin and Magic is book 2 in K.F. Breene's Demigods of San Francisco series, where broke, hidden necromancer Alexis has just made the worst, best decision of her life. She's agreed to work for Kyrian, a dangerously powerful demigod, to find and free his mother's trapped spirit before his vengeful father discovers their plan and kills them all. With the help of wildcard necromancer Bria, a fiercely loyal inner circle, and the two teens she's sworn to protect, Alexis is learning to wield terrifying new magic while navigating a San Francisco ruled by gods, demigods, and ghosts who all want something from her. It's a slow burn paranormal romance threaded through with found family, secret missions, and an off page villain whose shadow shapes every choice the characters make.
Perfect. All right. So, do you want to run me through really quick just what are the sort of like high level points you want to make sure that we really like highlight as we wrap up our discussion of sin and magic?
Okay. I have a page full of colors.
You're like, "Wait, I said pick the brightest ones and then there's all the bright colors. Oh no."
It's so true. I would say the umbrella of the notes that I have is remembering that for this book, as we will talk about, like as it being a book two, and this book in particular is really about life as they know it has changed. And so the points that I have is number one is making sure that the stakes for the protagonist that there are stakes for the protagonist individually. In this story, we see that the stakes for Lexi. Now that I say Lexi, I feel like I'm saying it wrong. That I'm talking about the wrong story.
Sorry, yeah, I know I threw you off by being like, let's talk about Galaxy Stern, who also goes by Alex.
Alex, exactly. I was like, is it just me, or does every book have an Alex or Lexi or Lex or whatever? So I'm just gonna say Lexi. Okay. That for Lexi as well as Kyrian, they both have stakes. And it is so important here because it affects both of them, but you want them to be individually strong, especially coming out of that book one. The second thing that rises to the surface is understanding how saying yes in book one helps them, but it also makes the mission harder. That was shown here, and I feel like it probably can feel like it's a light offering, but we won't talk about it a lot, but as someone that is continuing into the series, it is a bridge, you know. My third one that rose to the top is using this book to expand the world, but in expanding that world to show how that affects how it affects their choice, or their choice affects the world, right? The fact that we have not just Kyrian, but we have Kyrian and the Six, or Kyrian, his mother, and the Six, and even going out to San Francisco in general. And then for Alexis, it's her wards, and then I would say magical beings and beings period as a whole that are being affected by Balance's actions. And then the final thing that I have is in general, like knowing what in book two shows the book one decision is irrevocable. We may talk about this a little bit, I believe we will, but really kind of remembering that this is not just a series, that it is a series that's built on the romantic couple being the same couple across the series. And
Yeah.
so that's one of the things that you really want to show in book two. She did a great job here of showing them as standalone books, but also understanding how it's irrevocable and how this book is necessary becomes the challenge, and what we get to see in this case rise to the surface to make this a great read.
Yeah,
What about
yeah.
you?
Awesome. Yeah, so mine is I think largely focused on the fact that this is a book too. And I'm thinking about like how we want to think about a book too, just in general. If you're writing any kind of cohesive series. So we've talked about in the overview a little bit like serial style versus like longer running series. But how you want a book two to escalate the stakes, right? How you that book two should be an escalation of the stakes, but also watching out for some of the pitfalls, right? Because you have to escalate the stakes, but you're also not where you're going, because you have, if you're a trilogy, one more book. If you're K of Breene, apparently four more books, which is a lot of book. Like that, again, it's a lot of ground to have to cover. And so you have to be strategic, right, about the way that you plan out the book to ensure that the whole series is arcing correctly, and know like your each book doesn't feel like, one is a step back from another, right? So you have to make sure that it's escalating across the series. But I think there are some potential pitfalls that you should just be aware of if you're building a series really of any kind. And so that's where really all of my focus is, like my primary focus is going to be. Then I also want to talk about, again, inside of a book too, but this is true for any book, to use like the way that you can use characters to expand the world, so without us having to go to that place or see a particular thing, that the characters have an opportunity to bring the world to the protagonist and create that feeling that the world is bigger, right? So it may be a setup for something we will see, or if it's like, you have a world that has multiple nations and we won't go to all of them, but we have characters who come from different areas, you kind of can create that sense of bigness in the world, even if this particular book or this particular series won't actually travel to that part. And so some of the ways that you can kind of, I have some thoughts on some strategies that you can consider, if that's something that you're doing. But that's something that she does, right? Is like the characters expand the world of the different types of abilities and the different kinds of people who inhabit this world and experiences. Right? For example, Bria, right? She talks about the kind of network of necromancers, and that immediately gives you that the world feels that little bit bigger, right? And so characters are one of the ways that you can do that, and I think it's worth sort of like highlighting here. So those are my two big ones. So I would say, why don't we go ahead and start with talking about like stakes, and because this is all sort of, again, all of it sort of falls under this umbrella of like a book too. So do you want to start by kind of talking about the stakes and how it kind of like establishes stakes for them individually, each of our protagonists?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, I mean, in general, I mean, you want to make sure that if I'm working with clients, I always want to make sure that you have not just external stakes, but internal stakes. And in this case, also romantic stakes. Because what we find here is that for Alexis is something, and for Kieran is something else. But because this is also in a book too, and their world, like what we're about to talk about, expands, we begin to see how that sort of brings in the world, but it also exposes the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
For Alexis, we see that a part of the thing of that her life, as they know it, will never be able to go back, like it's forever changed, is the fact that she has lived her entire existence in hiding.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't new. Like it was with
Yeah.
her mother as well, right? And this
Mm-hmm.
is something that this is not giving a huge spoiler alert. This is book one, but we see this from the beginning, right? And so her saying yes to him, which kind of goes to the irrevocable that I talk about, but which was the last point. But when she says yes to him, this puts her in a space that she has intentionally avoided her entire life. And the
Mm-hmm.
moment that it exposes her, it also exposes the reason why her mother did it in the first place. And we still 100% don't know it, but that increased the stakes. If not, you're kind of just circling the same book, right? And what we're doing
Yeah.
is sort of moving across this arc. So there's the stakes for her, and then for Kieran, in this case, so when she agrees to do this mission for him, the mission is, the stakes are, how do we get this done without my father knowing before I want him to know? Now, what's amazing is both of their stakes sort of increase them for both of them. And that's what
Yeah.
makes this beautifully done, right? It's like they have their own individual goals, but their own individual goals are starting to intertwine. And they haven't fully the way that they are when we get through this book and into book 3, but it is starting to. And it started with her deciding to take that contract at the end of book 1, and
Yeah.
we come in book 2. So what happens here, and I'm just going to tie in my 2 because the 2 of them go together with the stakes. So yes, they have their individual stakes, but then as the story is progressing, it's making it harder. Why? Because the primary driver in this story, which we talked about in overview, is that this is a romance, and part of the romance is the push pull of the relationship. And in this case, yeah, they're physically attracted to each other, but he's a demigod and she thinks she's more like a regular girl, but she's not, right? I'm just a girl
Yeah.
and you're a boy, whatever they're saying. And so
I'm just a boy standing in front, or just a girl standing in front of a boy.
come on,
Obviously,
Julia
clearly, I've
Roberts.
seen the movie. I'm doing a good job. Carry on.
and so not only are the stakes there, but them being together, it sort of increases it because it exposes Alexa's and it exposes Kieran's plan, or it
Yeah.
could, right? So them just being together. So every time, and I think this is the thing that feels super subtle, but it's consistent. So that means every time they're together, it's a risk. It's a risk not just to them, it's a risk
Yeah.
to everything else that's important to them. For him in the beginning, it's his mother and getting her safely to the other side and being able to rest in the other side in peace and rest in her resting state, unlike she was able to do in life.
Yeah.
And for Alexis, it's her wards and their safety. Right. And so every time they come together and every time they sort of have, like, as we were moving through the story, it agitates that, or it increases the stakes for them. And so this being a book 2 and you having the same romantic couple, this is showing how they are continuing to wrestle with the push pull of the relationship, and they're continuing to have to decide, am I saying yes to this?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Kieran goes back and forth, right? This is not the right time pulling her into this. I want her to stay safe. The more he cares about her, the more he wants her to stay safe, the more he wants her to be away. But that's pushing her away, which would be hurtful to
Yeah.
her, being pushed away, right? So having, that would be the stakes. I think this is the part that I'll just like lay up the part that you're talking about. I think that's what makes this unique in a sense of being a book 2, not book 2s in general, but book 2s here, because it's the same romantic couple,
Yeah.
right? And so we need to have it that the relationship is progressing without them having arrived yet. We have 4 more books,
Yeah.
but it must be significant enough to put to put a pin in it,
Yeah. 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 And that's something that, again, it just fascinates me about this series in particular. And we have talked about this. I don't remember what book series we talked about, but we've talked about, we're seeing increasingly in romantasy trilogies that follow the same couple. Um, and being curious about how you maintain that romantic tension across 3 whole books, right? When normally it's like by the end of the book, like they're together, we did it.
Done.
But she takes this to the next level and is like, oh no, we're doing 6 books. And so you're exactly right. Like and this is something that I think overall, like if you're thinking about a series, however many books you're putting in it, if it's following the same like storyline, right? So we're following the same couple, we're following an overarching storyline, like that kind of thing. Again, we've talked about this. Don't recommend 6, like going for that one. But the point being that we need to see progression, right, in every book while still maintaining that tension, which means there has to be enough sort of space given to each part of their growth and each part of their movement toward, like, we'll say true intimacy, right? Where they have like they're fully themselves and they're fully their own couple and they're fully committed, right? They've hit their happily ever after. Means that you have to kind of draw out, right, those like, and really kind of know where you're going with the story and how many books you're doing so that you can plot it out. Because again, the promise made is that this is a romance. So I think that if we went through this book and we got nothing sexy, people would be like, excuse me, that is not the book that I was promised, right? Like it would be not delivering on the promise of that the first book made, where it's hinting at and letting us know like this is going to be a romance. And so knowing where you're going, right, with the story so that you can let each book play a meaningful role in that, and none of the books gets lost along the way, and none of the plot points get, you know, sidelined or get lost or move backwards along the way. And that's something that you kind of have to be mindful of when you're doing series. Series, again, following, I'm thinking about series, like I'm thinking about trilogies, epic fantasy, or following the same character. So I'm saying series, especially if we're talking about a romance, that's following the same couple.
I will say though, just as a small caveat, there are times, especially when you're doing it in a trilogy, that it can feel like the couple is going back. Not back literally, but as in that them breaking up or them pushing away love because they feel like it's the best thing, or fighting love because they're enemies and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's a part of their journey. And so I just think that we don't go into all of it, but there's just so many ways. This is not a common way, but this is her way. This is just how the story is. And so with that said, I think understanding where the book serves, and if you have a story like this that is a slow burn on the romance side, what she does is she delivers when it's on page. She also delivers how the progression of their intimacy and the progression of the relationship is on the page, and how it delivers, so that when you do get to the physical intimacy, it's a natural progression. And she finds ways for each one of those moments, honestly, to up the stakes, and also ultimately up the stakes and the conflict and the potential conflict because of their connection, which is a great thing as well. And basically what you're saying here, and I'm just echoing, is just knowing where you're going ensures that you do this point in that journey justice.
Yeah.
And that's what I believe, like you're saying, most. I was telling Rachel in the pre-show, whenever I'm working with students, especially the writers that are in our inner circle, and I review their series setup, they show their entire series layout. I should be able to look at their entire series at an airplane view, because understanding where we are and what the overarching arc is helps me to understand when we drop down in an individual book, and understand, well, what role does this individual book in this couple in this journey have as far as the impact on the overall series. And that's not every series, but it's helpful. And I think the last part of that would be that it's also helpful because that helps you to do the thing that you just mentioned, which is utilizing everything well, utilizing your environment, utilizing your secondary characters, utilizing your subplots, right? Because you understand what you're building towards.
Yeah, and that was definitely like one of the key takeaways that I had here is like, if you're building a not a serial style where, you know, each one is kind of its own standalone satellite in this world, and it's, you know, kind of like individual adventure. If you're building a series, like a running series, like plotting is really your friend here, knowing where it starts and where it ends so that each book again like pulls its weight along the way. Now I want to say that like this also means that like you've got to watch out for, I think there's some pitfalls and temptations that you can fall into, it like if you're not careful, or just if you don't have it in your mind, right? So we know that, so if we say got a trilogy and we've got 3 books and we know where we're going, it means that each book is going to have to escalate. Each book is going to have to be an escalation over the last. And so one of the things that you kind of want to like watch out for is um like either pulling your punches like excessively, right? So that it's sort of like the
Mm-hmm.
book doesn't seem to go anywhere because you're like, well, it's going to get crazy in book 3. And that means that like it feels like it maybe flatlines a little bit in the middle because you're trying to leave yourself space, but the result is that you're not exploring the stakes to the extent that you could. And this is where I just sort of want to reiterate that reminder
Mm-hmm.
from the plotting episode that stakes can look a lot of different ways. Um, and so, right, like stakes are not just more bodies or more injury or like more people dying or anything like that, but they are, interpersonal. They're how your choices, like again, I'm as a random, like off the top of my head, is like, the Lexi makes a choice and it has consequences that Valens, sees something is amiss in the system and it results in he's battening down the hatches on the city. So it's not directly actually affecting her and the crew, but what's happening is she's like, ooh, I messed up and it's impacting other people and now it's making the job harder. And so you're still like, so thinking about stakes, right? Like the gamut of stakes that you have available to you so that each book can meaningfully escalate without going like, you go crazy in book 2 and then book 3 feels like womp womp because it hasn't escalated over the book before it, um and so similarly, right, we talked about plotting as a part of doing that. I think that you sort of follow when it comes to like a trilogy or a series, um again, a series following one specific overarching arc, follows kind of the same rules as that we use for a novel, right? You want to set up the appropriate promises for the kind of story we're getting and have a trajectory for that story so that you can deliver on those promises and all of your subplots, your internal arc, all of that stuff can weave in. So again, that you don't accidentally just miss stuff and you have like a loose thread that was like, oops, it didn't make the cut, and then it's just like hanging out there like waving at you, right? um and so that's like, so we think about not just the individual book promise, but then the series promise, right, of where we want to take the story so that we can set that up and start setting it up in book 1, even though we have all of these great surprises and escalations and good stuff that our readers might not even know that we're going to be bringing them.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think the last part that I will say about that, and then we can go to the next point, is I think some of the things that we're talking about right now can feel like they're beginner things, um, as far as building a series. But I think this would be a great example of how you can have something that has life or death stakes, that she sort of allows herself to gradually move into. We understand the antagonist and him being a demigod and how it can mean death, but because he's at a distance, I think what she's doing really is milking that, right?
Yeah.
She's letting that work in her favor so that she can build our understanding of the world and of the protagonist and of watching them grow and their abilities. And I understand what you're saying. I also feel like sometimes, I guess, because as somebody that has a lot of writers that are like cozy or sweet romance, right? That your stakes are not always like boom, bam, pow. And I think
Yes.
ultimately, too, it's like understand like what number one, like when we were talking about Ninth House, like what am I promising in this book?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and what should they prepare for that is in alignment with how I've positioned it, from your opening chapters, your blurb, your title, your cover. I mean, our pre conversation like spills right into this, and then taking that and then deciding like, okay, now where do we go up from here? In each one of those books, trekking up, even when you have like your all is lost across the thread, it
Mm-hmm.
still is, the stakes are still over what we've had before, even if you're emotionally at a low. And I think that's something that can feel already challenging in of itself. So when you add 5 more books, It's
I
just, you
wouldn't
just
do
got to be prepared. I would. We're just trying to keep all the people straight. So it just, I think, I mean, what we're saying at the end of the day is you want the escalation of stakes. You want to make sure that as you're building is that the best way to help you to understand if you've done that in that particular story is understanding where you've come from and where you're going.
Yeah.
And Rachel says, it's a good idea. I think plotting is always the idea, right? Because either you're going to do it now or you're going to do it later. You will have to do it. And so, and that makes me think about sort of what you are talking about too. I think what she sort of leaned into in this book is how those choices affected the world at large. And so it increased the stakes merely by proximity, right? Alexa's making a choice affects Mordecai and Daisy, right? Kieran making a choice and a visible choice affects him, the six, or the people who are following him, and that's doing this mission that's unknown to most, to the world at large. And so them choosing to be together in the romantic capacity runs the risk of exposing everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those subtle things here, but it is a major stake. It just sort of lays there and almost at a simmer because it
sort of
does.
running in
It
the
exposes
background.
all of them.
Yeah. And one of the things actually that you mentioned that I just kind of, this is like a good opportunity to sort of like tack on here. And this is like kind of a good way to sort of segue into like using characters to expand the world as well. One of the things that I think is really important that you pointed out that I just want to like highlight is the fact that when she expands the world, when we get a broader sense of the world and how it's working and what else is out there, through the characters or through the plot, it's not just, isn't that interesting? Like, isn't that fun information? But it's specifically that as the world gets bigger, it's the realization that there are more and bigger threats inside that world, right? So it's not just getting bigger for its own sake, but it is like what it's exposing them to is, especially Lexi, how many threats there are and how big those threats are. And even some of them are new to Kieran as well. It's like, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Valens is doing what? And so that's the way that expanding your world can be a part of escalate, and kind of is a natural part of escalating those stakes. And I think that's something that good world building does, especially across, particularly across the series, but it's true in a standalone as well, where as the world gets bigger, it's like, oh, look, these are all the things that can kill me out here. Awesome. And you have both of those things happening. And then, go ahead.
I was going to say, and she does it really well here that, I hope I explained this right, where she exposes us to something that Alexis was already doing and not fully understanding what she was doing. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, that's what I was doing. And then that it could be something that can be flipped and that can be a bad thing or that can be a soul ripping thing or whatever. She just thought she was fiddling around, and it sort of is like another degree of increasing the stakes. The more she understands and that we understand as readers what she's doing or not doing, it again is another level of escalation, and in this case another possibility of being exposed.
Yeah, and more reasons why Valens would want her.
Exactly.
And why being exposed would be like, at first it was like, oh no, like I'd get like in trouble like with someone who is known for disappearing people. And then it's like, oh no, I could get discovered by someone who actually really wants what I have. And that's a really big problem for me and everybody in the world, right? And so I think that that's something that she does really effectively. It's like when we see the world building out, we're like, ooh, not only is this how it works, this is how it's being used for evil and for control and manipulation. And again, that actually fuels Lexi's motivation as well for why she's like, I want to participate in running counter to what Valens is doing, right? Because she has a personal conviction about what he's doing and that it's wrong and wanting to sort of get involved in what Kieran is up to. And so that progresses over the course of the story. So the last just little like tidbit that I want to add is characters are another way that you can expand our sense of the world. And the thing that I kind of want to highlight here is that a couple of things when you're developing a secondary cast, again, particularly in a world that you're trying to build out a little bit, number one, I think looking for contrasting characteristics personality wise is going to give your secondary cast more dynamic, like more of a dynamic nature, because it's going to make them feel like as they're distinct, it means their interactions become very distinct, and that's what endears us to them. But then even one step beyond that, if we're thinking about this is a way that I can actually make my world feel bigger, in a meaningful way, the thing that I would sort of um, say be advised about, we don't see this in Sin and Magic, but making your cast too samey, right? This is something that I see in particular with new writers, where the characters, they all come from kind of the same background, and they maybe have sort of different capabilities, and a lot of times they don't even have their own specific goals. They're kind of just like, there's like a tether connecting them to the protagonist, and they're just sort of like following along. But the opportunity with your cast is to make your world feel bigger, right? So different abilities, different perspectives, different walks of life, having their own goals, like having them be sort of like internally motivated by something so that they show up with an opportunity to grow or not grow, and to like that, especially over a series that we will see them sort of shift and change, and they're who you could do literally anything, right? We could watch them veer off and go in a bad direction. We can watch them become awesome. There's you can take them in any direction, but what it means is that they are adding to the entire series as a whole. Like they are making a real contribution, and again, making like bringing that big world to the protagonist, and therefore to the reader. So we get introduced, because of Bria, to first of all the types of necromancers, and the fact that there's this sort of like necromancer network. We don't learn a lot about it, we just learn from her that it exists. But she also is someone with super specific goals, and that affects the way that she does things and the level of involvement, at least in this book, right, that she's interested in having. You have Mordecai, who's a shifter. We learn about some of the six who have their own abilities. You have Daisy, who's human, non-magical, but she kind of has her own gifts, and we start to see those come out, and her getting to lean into her own abilities. And so, again, where the risk can sometimes have like a group of people who are sort of like they're all kind of the same, really thinking about contrasting your characters and thinking about where do they come from in your world, what do they bring from the world, like what do they show the reader and the protagonist about the world and how it works and how they've been affected by it, right? There's all of these things that you can look at to really meaningfully develop your cast so that they actually feel like they matter, and they're not just like non-playable characters who follow around the protagonist, right? Who are like, I have this ability, shwum, and they like, they're like, I'm the healer, I do wave magic, whatever, like, that kind of thing. And again, I say these things because it's something that I see commonly with like when I get like a diagnostic across my desk, or I see, I have a new writer who's sort of like wrestling over something. These are sort of some of the common pitfalls that I see. So I think it's a nice opportunity to like really expose the kinds of opportunities that you have in your cast building and world building, to bring those things together in a really nice way and make the whole thing feel fuller and more interesting and more exciting, and make the world feel more like a place in motion and less like a set.
I agree. And I think here for me, as you're saying that, the biggest takeaway for me is that doing it here helps you to understand what the stakes are beyond this relational couple.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Beyond these, like, does have a little under a dozen people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so because we're seeing the others, just like in book one, we sort of saw them at the market, right? We saw others at the market, and now what we're starting to see, we saw others at the government building or whatever, and other people there, and so it's sort of just like opening up the world, so we see that whatever they do and how it affects balance, it affects more than just their found family. It affects others. And so having that, it gives you a lens into what the stakes are bigger than this immediate decision.
Yeah, yeah. And makes them more personal because they're literally impacting people and they're personified
That's
in
right.
people who will be affected.
That's right.
Which helps create that, give them feel like, make the stakes feel like they have real weight to them, because there's
Exactly.
like characters and people we care about too who are going to be affected by this. And so are there any other points that we did not hit yet, that you wanted to make sure that we talk about before we wrap our discussion on sin and magic?
I sort of touched on it, but the final thing is just in this case, and I would say any case, like make sure that you are showing how the decision that the characters make is irrevocable.
Mm-hmm.
And here it's so important because if at any time Lexi can just walk away, then it sort of strips a lot of the stakes that we as we know it, and it sort of like
Mm-hmm.
releases that tension that you
Yes.
have and that you're using to build on.
Yep.
And I mean, we talked about the boot camp, but the boot camp, that was a big thing of realizing like that inciting incident really builds towards what causes them to be adhered together and that decision that they make. And in this case,
Yeah.
being a book two, those are the things that happened in book one
Mm-hmm.
that set
Yep.
up to give us the foundation for book two. So if you don't lock that in and that's too squishy, then it sort of just, it honestly makes your work harder as a
Yes.
writer in book two. But when you
Yes.
lock that in, it strengthens it because we already understand that what they're up against and how
Mm-hmm.
they can't go back. And you can't just
Yeah.
say, I'm out of here, because the
Mm-hmm.
moment she's being exposed and people know that she really isn't, and the moment she went to go do that testing and no, you're not just a little whatever number two or whatever magic level that she pretended to be
Mm-hmm.
for all those years, it's basically you don't go back home, Toto, right?
Yeah.
You were
Yeah.
stuck in Oz. You're stuck
Yeah.
in Oz. And that the reality is that there's consequences for everything, and right now in this book we see
Mm-hmm.
the consequences are that you can't go back.
Yeah.
The three of them huddled up, you just can't. And so, and then every other decision that they're making, how it takes it, and then in this case it brings them more and more together. It
Mm-hmm.
solders them, it takes them from being these two, people that had no idea of who they were in a specific way, until they get to a point where they're merging until they become this one through
Yeah.
line. And
Yeah.
you're at all times doing that, and doing it in a way that serves the story and serves the characters, and that keeps us glued to the
Yeah.
story as readers. So
Yeah.
that was my final one for today.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us for this month-long look at sin and magic. I've made it the whole series, like the whole set of episodes, without saying sin and chocolate.
Chocolate.
And I'm
You did.
celebrating that right now because my brain every time was like chocolate or magic, chocolate or magic, chocolate or magic. We made it to the end, ladies and gentlemen, and we said sin and magic every time. Yes.
Every time.
So thank you everyone so much for joining us for our study of Sin and Magic by K.F. Breene. We will be back at you next week with our overview for Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. So look forward to that. Better get reading now so you're ready for our discussion. And until then, don't forget to give us a like, subscribe, hit the little bell if you're a YouTube watcher. Leave us a comment if you have questions or thoughts about Sin and Magic. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to take any questions that you guys have and start fielding those in some of our bonus episodes.
And visit us at storydeepdive.com if you are unsure where to find us.
Yes, yes. Don't forget to visit us at storydeepdive.com. And like I said, we'll see you guys back here next week. But until then, happy writing.